mental gap that we have. A big part of this is listening, and this is actually where the online tools that you have available to you at your disposal become really, really important, because social media and social networking is really interesting to be able to, you know, reach people with your message and do all kinds of stuff, but it's different than anything else before, because you have the ability to actively listen in ways that were previously unimportant or not available to you. We, in this active listening process, we have to think about who we're listening to as well. And it goes back to this us versus them, that I am separate from one another. And we have to get past identifying with people who are completely ideologically similar to us, who look like us, who have the same kind of tech know-how as us, and bringing lots of different kinds of people into the work that we're doing, or going into the work that other people are already doing, and figuring out how we can be best made useful. A big part of this, people end up, as we start talking about this, people start ending up talking about diversity. And when I talk about having lots of different kinds of people in the conversation, a metaphor that I often use is that our communities are a lot like little ecosystems, and you can kind of think of things along the lines of DNA, that if you have the same strands of DNA mixing around the gene pool together, what happens? Species mutates poorly, dies off, not such a great thing. So what you need to have is lots of different kinds of people and lots of different kinds of DNA mixing in that gene pool together, so that your species can strengthen itself as it evolves. And we have to think about our community this way. And diversity in itself isn't even enough. We actually have to commit to equity and ensuring that those different types of people are actually influencing the conversation and influencing the decisions that get made. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I think that frustrates me most on the left right now, is that we think that we're better than other people, and that we have these great progressive values, and of course we're not racist, and of course we're not sexist, but in reality, A, we all are, just go there, you know. But B, we have to be able to get past our own kind of ego and defenses and embrace this kind of equity, because study after study has shown that when we embrace and account for difference, the difference between you and me, not just kind of gloss over it, not pretend that it doesn't matter right now because we're all fighting the good fight together. When we embrace difference, we make better decisions, both as individuals and whole societies. I can refer you to some amazing research about this. So listening is a big part of this thread discovery that I'm talking about, and this kind of weaving together. Another part of this that I think is really interesting is I interviewed for another project. I interviewed a guy in Berlin this summer who had been a strategist working on several pieces of different movements within the Arab Spring. And we got talking about the standing ovation moment that happens in organizing, and what can we do to create standing ovation moments? Because you get one person standing in the standing ovation, what happens?
Then everyone else.
No, if one person's standing, everybody else goes. And then you get two people standing, and then everybody's like, should I? So, and then you get a couple more. There's an algorithm actually that you can do depending on the size of the group, that you can actually measure when people will be able to stand. So the work that Mark is doing is creating the structures putting the structures in place that make the standing ovation less scary for people to join into and happen at critical flashpoints. And Occupy is actually a really good example of how the standing ovation moment works, along with thread discovery and community weaving. So the story that's presented in the mainstream media is that a Canadian magazine put out a call, and everybody said, everybody go to this park in September, and we're going to protest. And then everybody showed up, and it was magic. And that's how it was. Right? Like, that's the story that you often hear, that Canadians, you know, blame Canada. So anyway, that's actually not what happened. That's, you know, you've heard a lot about Occupy this morning already, so I'm not going to rehash a lot of it. But it had much more to do with people who had already been organizing and doing different encampments in different places, already having meetings, figuring out what's our next step going to be, organizing some kind of structural moments, and putting kind of structures in place, and then hearing about this Adbusters thing. They said, well, that seems like a good idea, let's do that. They'd already been having the General Assembly meetings, and, you know, admittedly much smaller. Other encampments after that, you know, started to spring up elsewhere. So this was this kind of thread moment. People were kind of already knowing that something was going on, and they started connecting these threads together, spreading it to other cities. Then the standing ovation moment came. What was the standing ovation moment?
The bridge.
No.
Oh, the girls getting pepper sprayed.
Girls getting pepper sprayed. Unfortunately, we're all into, you know, especially the mainstream media is really into protest porn, and, you know, a video of these kind of idyllic-looking young white women, you know, not doing anything and getting pepper sprayed by cops is a flashpoint moment. What was great about Occupy and what was done really, really well is that the structures were already in place, and several people were already kind of standing in the standing ovation. So it made it very easy for just a crap load of other people to stand up and join in. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking. It's not this kind of top-down or even bottom-up kind of organizing. It's a much more horizontal way of weaving things. Much more time about it? You know?
Keep going. A little bit. Thank you.
Like. So somebody cut me off right now. Okay. So one case study that I actually did want to share with you, and the link isn't active now, but it will be by this afternoon. You can actually look up a full case study of a social media campaign that where we actually broke down and dissected. Here's how we built this campaign. These are the tools that they use. This is how much it cost. This is why we thought the way that we did. And these are all of the different parts of it. And there was a show happening last year on MTV. Who watches reality shows on MTV? Admit it. Okay, who knows Teen Mom and 16 and Pregnant? You guys have heard of 16 and Pregnant? All right, so these shows have been running for a couple of years on MTV, and never had MTV shown a teenager opting to have an abortion, even though teen pregnancies, 37% of them do end in abortion. MTV was like, la la la, it doesn't happen. So MTV decided finally last year that they were going to do an abortion special. They were going to show 3 young women who had decided to have abortions. And so what they did was they decided to air it the Tuesday night after Christmas, not tell anybody about it, and not air commercials during it so that there wouldn't be some sort of big outcry. They were terrified of doing this, but some decision maker somewhere actually thought this might be a good idea. So they reached out to an organization in the Bay Area called Exhale. Exhale is the nation's first and I think still only national, non-judgmental, multilingual post-abortion talk line. Anybody can call up after they've had an abortion or their partner has had an abortion and talk about their experience in a completely non-judgmental way. So originally MTV reached out to them and said, do you know any women that would want to go on our show? And then Exhale ended up having the ability to partner with them and kind of help them shape what it looks like to present abortion in a non-judgmental way. Because what Exhale has discovered is that it's such a polarizing issue. People are so far on either side of this issue. The biggest thing that's missing from the abortion debate are women. Women's stories, women's voices, talking about what happens and how they feel when they have abortion. And so they call their movement the pro-voice movement, and this is what they're about. So they decided they were going to do a social media campaign around this special, and they wanted to get the word out about it because certainly MTV wasn't going to be doing anything to get it out there. And we started thinking about what this would look like. And Aspen Baker, who's the ED over there, said, you know, we have this, I have this vision of just creating a space, just setting up a space on live where we can just say, you are loved. You've had an abortion, you know someone who's had an abortion, you are loved. Because who can argue with love, right? Who can say, love is dumb and I hate you? You know, I mean, okay, you can, but you look like a douchebag. Whatever. So, so we started thinking about what that might actually look like. And so what we did, and again, this case, oh, I started to give you the URL. The case study is, will be later, because I forgot to do it before I left the house, is at deannazant.com/case study. It'll be there by maybe 2 o'clock or so this afternoon. And this is where we break down this whole campaign that we worked on.
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
deannazant.com/case study. No problem.
And your first name is spelled D-E-A-N-N-A.
Yes,
Oh.
Z-A-N-E-T. Kind of all the A's and N's in it, kind of make it nice and rhymey. And
You said you wrote a book earlier and you didn't say which kind of book.
the book is Share This! Exclamation point. How you will change the world with social networking. Okay, so what happened in this campaign? Why did this campaign work the way that it did? So what we did was we set up a website, first of all. Really simple WordPress website. We took submissions from people to be able to tell the women who were on the show, and by extension, all women who had had abortions, that they were loved, and to share their story. And we specifically said we will accept no kind of political rhetoric. The minute that rhetoric enters the conversation, women shut down. Women's voices, women choose not to participate often in this particular space. And so, you know, even when people would email us and be like, "You're loved, you're so, you know, you're great, and it's amazing, and you made your choices, and this is why you should call your senator and vote for pro-choice, blah, blah." Like, we didn't even take that. We would write people back and say, "You've got to take this part out in order to get your story told." And so what happened, and this is where kind of thread discovery started to happen, and we used Twitter and Facebook to get the word out about this. We had several hundred submissions. I think close to 300 submissions. Only about 3 to 5 of them were trolls and people, you know, writing, you know, hateful stuff, and of course we didn't take those. The rest of them were messages like this. "Today I found these videos on MTV. At first I didn't know what to think. I had an abortion myself at 16, and for over 2 years I tried to hide it and hide the pain that came along with my decision. I was in a physically and emotionally abusive relationship with a boy who was unfaithful and not there for me. If it were not for my family, I would not be here today. I did not want to have an abortion, but I was out of school at the time and I knew down the road it would be the right decision. Thank you for reminding me that I am not a bad person and that I am not alone." Or this one. "I watched the show last night and I have to say I'm so amazed and inspired by these girls to be able to not feel ashamed and embarrassed about their choice. I watched, crying, wishing I had someone to talk to about my abortion. I've not been able to tell my own mother, and it's been several years. So thanks for your voice. I know now that I am not alone in my feelings, and a little bit of my shame is gone." So what does that mean when you hear hundreds of these stories coming in? I can tell you about the metrics. I can tell you how many hits we got and how many mentions of the hashtag, how many people we had in our live blog. But what really mattered in the end, what really connected, where our standing ovation moment came, was women writing to us, telling us, "I feel a little less shame because of what you did." And that's what matters. This is the kind of work that we can do together when we put ourselves into this, when we take our egos out of the equation, and when we connect and become human with one another again. Thank you.
So once again, my name is Matt Locksin, and I work at CREDO Action. For those of you who don't know CREDO, it's a little bit weird. The way I synthesize it is, it's an activist organization housed inside of a for-profit phone company that uses the revenue to fund progressive social change. We donate a lot of money, over $65 million to progressive nonprofits since '85, and we're the largest corporate donor to Planned Parenthood, for example.
Wow.
And then we also do a lot of online organizing, and that's what I do. My job is to sell phones. I don't know much about phones, as some of you know. But my heart and soul is in, progressive social change, and I'm very privileged to have an awesome opportunity to do that and share some of what I know with y'all. So here's the challenge that I was given for this talk. I was like, oh, what do you want me to talk about making good online petitions? Because CREDO, we have 2.4 million people on our email list. We send out a lot of emails. You might see my name in some of your boxes, probably more often than you would hope. And we do a lot of petitions, and there's a lot of people who kind of hate on petitions. And so Alana told me, tell the people from organizations with a small list and a small budget why online petitions don't suck and how they can be useful. That's pretty much what the mission is. And, let me just start off by saying, so petitions do get a bad rap, and some of it is justified. So, the critique is that, one, they don't do anything. Two, they give people who care about issues a false sense that they're doing something about the issue when really they're not doing anything. And that, three, this is more of a critique of the people who use them, that basically they're cynically used by organizations who are not interested in promoting change to the petitions. They're interested in building a list that they can fundraise on. So, and there are definitely organizations who do petitions that are like that. The other thing is, even though when you're trying to, earnestly do petitions, there are some kind of key things that people often do that, mistakes that are commonly made. And, the biggest one, I think, is that there's no or an implausible theory of change. The theory of change is something that many of you might have heard about. The easiest way of thinking about it, if you're not, deep in the weeds, is kind of like, what's the value proposition to a person in this petition or signing it? Or another way of thinking about it is, how by taking action am I actually moving the ball forward on something that I care about? And the good, famous counterexample to, theory of change, that is like a petition that had no theory of change, was when the DSCC had a petition with telling Norm Coleman to drop out, as though a Republican senatorial candidate cares what a bunch of Democrats, whose job it is to elect Democrats to the Senate, think about what he's doing. So the other thing that's often, goes wrong with, online organizing in general, online petitions, is that there's really, it's kind of closely connected to the theory of change problem, but that there's really no thought about the mechanism about how this works. And the way that I talk about it is the underpants gnome theory of the internet. Do you guys know the underpants gnome? Yeah, so for those of you who don't know or who don't watch South Park, the underpants gnomes were a satire of a lot of
Should have liked you back then.
Yeah.
I think someone was.
Oh, that was me, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, somebody-
This happens all the time.
I thought when you
yeah.
Is that always happening?
Kick it in the romantic play.
Underpants gnomes are a satire of a lot of startups in Silicon Valley, and they present a business plan that goes as follows. 1, collect underpants. 2, question mark. 3, profit. I have that same type of problem a lot with online organizing, where people don't simply think about the connection of how to do something and get where you want to go. And so it's bad enough when you don't articulate a theory of change so people don't understand it, but if you don't even have that mechanism, if that doesn't even go into your thinking about figuring out what you're going to do, and you're kind of starting off on the wrong foot. So, the response to the critique, though, right? So there's definitely a lot of cases you can point to where things go bad. So my first response, though, is like, So a lot of petitions suck, but not all petitions suck. You know, tell me why. I mean, the first thing to remember is 90% of everything is crap. Right? This came up yes, it's actually Sturgeon's law. 90% of everything is crap. It's a corollary, except for crap, 100% of crap is crap. The reason that I bring that up is just to remember that it's hard to do things well, and just because there's a lot of people who haven't figured it out doesn't mean that there's not some underlying principles that you can figure out if you look at good case studies. So the second point that I like to make to people is that not all petitions are about winning social change. Now, that's something that might seem a little counterintuitive, but you have to remember that sometimes there are internal organizing reasons for you to communicate with your members, and a petition is a mechanism to do that. So, for example, there's a famous formulation that education leads to organization, which allows you to do mobilization. So if you don't have that education piece, if people don't know what the issue is, and they don't know how it impacts them, you're not going to be able to organize them. And so sometimes you need people to learn something, and you need a mechanism to get them to participate and be active, and not just throw your email in the trash. And so sometimes that's the function that online petitions do. Ari Melber talks about email lists as providing a disintermediated way of communicating with people, and that's kind of a big word, but it's actually pretty good, because the point is that in our corporate media culture, there's a lot of superficiality and a lot of bullshit. A lot of people, frankly, don't want to make sure that people understand the type of things that we're talking about. And so being able to then send people your own perspective and start to get them on the road of understanding how they might address a problem is important. The petition itself might be useful as a mechanism that starts them down that road, even though you realize that the petition itself is not going to, per se, help you win. It's really about talking to your membership and getting them on board with something and starting them along this process. The other thing is internally, a lot of times you have limited resources and you want to figure out who you're going to focus on, for example, for volunteer recruitment asks. And so, the petition is a way of people self-identifying that they care about this issue. And you can take them up what's called the ladder of engagement. It's a term some of you probably know. I actually had a little chart that I did that I won't share because I didn't finish it. But there was a ladder of engagement 1.0 and then the ladder of engagement 2.0. And the ladder of engagement 1.0 went, exchange phone numbers, go on a date, become a couple, become engaged. Right? And that's kind of a pun, I guess. It's not very funny. That's funny to me. and again, the reason that people commonly understand, that you don't go up to someone that you haven't met and say, hey, will you marry me? Or if you do, you're unlikely to be successful. Because that person, theoretically, if you do things right, would consent to that. Right? So you have to start off with the first step. And the first step is, you like the person, you want to start to talk with them, communicate with them. The first thing you need is their phone number, right? And so a petition is like the first step, you get their email address. It's kind of similar. You start the relationship, right? And then you can bring people along through, over time, in a stepwise fashion to more and more serious asks, right? And so people are going to respond to the volunteer recruitment ask or the donation ask much better if they have a long relationship with you and they've taken smaller intermediary steps along the way. Just like someone would respond much better to the proposal if you've gone on some dates with them and you're actually a couple. So I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, and just to give you online organizing, people don't realize that. And the thing that's actually been really interesting is sometimes people have actually gotten, for example, more people to make phone calls by sending an email that's not about phone calls, but it's about signing the petition, and as soon as you sign the petition, it dumps people on the phone call page, than by sending an email that asks people to make a phone call. Which sounds very counterintuitive, but it's just, you kind of lower the barriers to entry, and then people take one step, and then they realize that's not so hard, and in the mindset to take another one. Okay, so that's Oh, and then there's one other thing about petitions, and then sometimes not being like about social change per se, or about, you know, winning. Sometimes people have a need to just say something that, you know, in a collective way, express an emotional truth. You know, a really good example from that really great movie Network is, you know, when people are yelling out the window, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore," right? Sometimes there is a kind of identity forming property of, you know, people collectively all affirming the same basic emotional truth or principles, especially when it's in the face of a culture that is often dismissive of that, where the message is you're the only one who thinks that, you're a fringe, you're extremist, right? And so sometimes it's really important as an organizer to bring people together, to give, you know, and give them an outlet for their passions, you know, when, you know, for example, you lose, right? Because all of us will lose some of our fighting. And then so giving people a way of kind of productively speaking out, bearing witness, and understanding that they're not the only ones and they're participating in a larger collective also is an important way that petitions can work that, you know, are not really about how the target will receive. So that's kind of the framework. But then, you know, you can also use petitions to win. And so I'm going to get down to brass tacks and just talk about that a little. Okay, so the first thing, the most straightforward way that people can use petitions, and this won't be for everyone in all cases, but I think it's really underutilized, is using petitions to collect public comment periods. Public comment periods are opportunities for people to weigh in on things, and petitions are a great way of soliciting public comment. So, you know, a couple of examples. In California, where I'm based, you know, we have lethal injection as a method of capital punishment. And there's been a lot of lawsuits that the ACLU and others have, you know, taken to court that have caused a moratorium on capital punishment under the idea that the way lethal injection is conducted is cruel and unusual. So the ACLU in Northern California came to us and said, hey, there's a public comment period, and we really want people to speak out and explain that these proposed changes to the procedure are still cruel and unusual. So will you help us with that? And we're like, sure. You know, we, you know, organizationally and personally are against it as well. So we sent out a petition to people we thought might care about this, and we got 8,000 signatures. The ACLU and all of its allied organizations, the whole like anti-capital punishment movement in California, other than us, got 2,000 people to submit public comments. So we added 4 times those numbers, which blew them away and was really impactful. Another thing, net neutrality, something that CREDO.
Hey, one quick question on the petition. You weren't asking them to submit individual comments. You were just asking them to sign on to. Correct.
Well, we're asking them, so I'll.
We're going to take questions at the end.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I mean, but I'll actually go through a couple examples and then I'll kind of get back to that. You know, so net neutrality, it was one of the first public comment periods that I had worked on, where we collected 98,000 public comments in support of net neutrality. And to address the question, the way we did it first was we said, hey, you should submit this public comment. Here is a sample public comment, right? So people actually did have the ability to edit it if they wanted to. But then we went back to the people who had not edited it and said, you know, it'd be really much more impactful if you personalize this and put it in your own words. And we gave them some prompts and some things to think about. And something like 13 or 14,000 of them actually did that, where they went back and they wrote something. So not having done public comment periods before, I didn't realize that there were all these complicated rules about, you know, how you submit them and who you submit them to. So we finally figured that out, and on the very last day, we submitted all of them. And then I saw a Google alert hit about this, and from a trade publication. So the FCC had been, you know, people can submit public comments on an ongoing basis. You don't have to wait till the last day. We didn't realize that. And so there was 20,000 public comments, 10,000 pro, 10,000 con. Then we gave them 98,000 public comments, 14,000 of which were personalized. So even if you take out the petitioning kind of comments, that was still more than double the number of pro-public comments. And so I think it was something like 86 or 89% of the public comments in that comment period came from us. And then also the third thing is, for-profit colleges. I call them, subprime colleges. They have a lot of So, I had a friend who was very involved in college affordability. She said, look, like these colleges are, trying to, kill these regulations. Can you help us? And, the big for-profit colleges were, had a paid effort to solicit public comments. So we went out and we were able to balance the deck. So, we were able to just keep it so that it wasn't a complete blowout, because a lot of these policy organizations don't have a big membership base, and so it's really hard for them to collect lots of public comments. And they have people who are experts in the nation on this issue. But when you're going up against these corporate campaigns and administrations that are not necessarily inclined to listen to the policy people, but who are looking at the politics, it really does help counterbalance that pressure if you can show some public support, and public comments are a way of doing it. One thing I should note, it's a public comment, so it's public. So if you collect them, give people a disclaimer. Make sure they know that their name, their and information, and their comment will all be public record. You don't want someone who's trying to hide from a stalker or something to submit a public comment and then to have that be able to be searchable on the internet or something. So I do think that due diligence is required. Another thing, really straightforward. Use petitions to show support for people who do things you like. Right? It's really, elected officials really like it when you send an email out that says, thank Eric Schneiderman for standing up for New York, right? Especially when they're getting a lot of flack for something, and it's challenging. One of my favorite examples is kind of a combination of a petition, and it was a little kitschy. It was Deborah Bowen, as California Secretary of State, was very courageous in decertifying our electronic voting machines right before the presidential primary election in 2008. And everyone was predicting that without these electronic voting machines, it would be chaos. And it wasn't. It all went really well. And it was right before Valentine's Day. So people liked Deborah Bowen, and so we sent out, I wasn't working at CREDO at the time, but we sent out a petition that said, sign this petition, thank Deborah Bowen, and for every petition signature, we will give her one of those chocolate kisses, right, for Valentine's Day. Show Deborah Bowen some love, and by love we mean chocolate, right? I ended up delivering 60 pounds of chocolate to her, and I saw her for months. Every time she saw me, she was talking about how she couldn't get rid of all of it. It was a real way of demonstrating this widespread support in a way that was very tangible and cheap. Okay, so then I'm going to now talk about more of the complicated cases. I mean, the thing to remember about petitions is, the timing, the target, the ask are all very important. And so I'm going to talk about kind of soft targets, meaning there are ways of doing petitions where sometimes they're actually more likely to succeed and move the needle. So one is, local politicians fairly unused to getting large numbers of petitions about something, especially something where you're being critical of them. A great example, I live in Oakland. I, along with a lot of people, was outraged by the Oakland police and blamed our mayor for being very inept when she allowed the police to clear out, the Occupy Oakland campsite. And so CREDO sent out a message to people in Oakland and also in California who had previously shown support for Occupy Wall Street, and we said, look, tell the mayor that and this was right before the general strike. There's going to be a general strike. You have to guarantee the safety of peaceful protesters. It's completely unacceptable for peaceful protesters to be attacked by the police, and your job as mayor means that you must guarantee their safety. So we sent it out, and within 5 hours, we got about 300 signatures from people in Oakland and about 7,000 signatures from people elsewhere in California. And we sent it to the mayor, and then we forwarded what we sent to the mayor, which is kind of a more generic, box, to the deputy mayor. just want to make sure, the deputy mayor was one of her closest confidants and advisors, that we want to make sure you saw this delivery. We sent it at 4 p.m., the day before the general strike. At 4:10 p.m., my boss got a call from the deputy mayor wanting to talk about this. Right? They're just not used to it, and we all know there have been widespread acrimony and criticism about how the mayor handled the Occupy Wall Street protest. But still, this was enough the day before the general strike to get the deputy mayor, 10 minutes after we sent it, to call us. 2, Missouri had a voter ID law that the governor vetoed. The advocates on the ground told us that our 1,000 signatures from people all across Missouri, when the governor's staff heard that the advocates on the ground were going to deliver this, freaked out. And because they were just completely unused to receiving that kind of attention as the governor of Missouri. And he indeed vetoed it. And then more recently, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board had a horrible campaign that basically insinuated that women get raped because they drink too much, and it's really the women need to make sure they don't drink a lot, not that like men need to not drink women. so yeah, I know, crazy, right? So one of my colleagues sent out an email that said, you need to take down these ads, you need to publicly apologize, and you need to make an unequivocal statement that, only rapists are responsible for rape, right? So they did, right? 12 hours after we had sent it, we'd sent in 12,000 emails, and when they sent an email out to everyone saying, hey, we'd like to respond to you personally, but the sheer volume of emails makes that logistically impossible. So we're sending this. And then in the email, they used identical language from our petitions. So clearly they got the message. People who care about goodwill or public image, so corporations, right? So B of A, they care about it enough that like when Change.org started a petition and there was a lot of news about them increasing their fees, the blowback was enough for them to shelve the idea, and that was a win. Also, Blue Cross in California, again, they were going to raise rates, and a petition was enough, along with the media strategy about it, was enough to make them back down. Groups affiliated with the bad actor who are not necessarily themselves invested in the bad actor. So, for example, when John Boehner hired a lawyer to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, the law firm who employed that lawyer had prided itself on its LGBT, inclusivity, and they were not really ready to be held responsible for the actions of this lawyer, and then he actually resigned from the firm, and because they did not want to deal with it. They just were not ready for the blowback, and they were not invested in it, and so they cut that tie. Target's not accustomed to public scrutiny or public engagement, right? So the UC Board of Regents, right, we sent in a petition about banning the use of pepper spray on nonviolent protesters at the UC, and got the Board of Regents, the chair of the Board of Regents and the president of the University of California system to send us responses, because they're kind of bureaucrats. I mean, they do raise money and they have some sort of public profile, so they're not completely unused to this, but they're unused to massive, really public condemnation about something that they're not normally prepared to deal with, right? They're prepared to deal with with tuition increases, but things like police brutality is completely out of their ken, and so they're a relatively soft target on that. Corporate officers and board members, a lot of our labor friends like to show up outside of people's houses. They don't like it because they're not used to being a target. Similarly with petitions. And then also, like, legislators, when the issues are really esoteric or inside baseball. So, for example, dear colleague letters. Members of Congress are really unused to getting petitions from their constituents about dear colleague letters. And so when you send them, that actually impacts them in a way that a more generalized, hey, support this issue. I'll just go real quickly. So targets who think that the public isn't watching. Sunlight really is the best disinfectant, and if you send something out that says, that names the villain and tells, for example, their constituents what they've been doing, a lot of times they'll back off. So a good example is a lot of Democrats signed a really bad letter around net neutrality, and then when we sent an email with the subject line, Rep so-and-so sold you out to AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon, we got chiefs of staff calling us because they didn't like it. And they were really unprepared to get that kind of heat about something that the telecoms really cared about, but they didn't think their constituents would care about. And then finally, this is kind of a smaller tip, people who get email on their BlackBerry. So when Valero, which is the largest independent oil refiner in the country, was trying to start an anti-global warming, and we had a global warming law in California, and they were trying to overturn it. We were able to figure out the CEO's personal email. And we sent him 5,000 emails in the first 24 hours of people saying, hey, butt out of California. And global warming is a big deal, and you really should not, screw with our laws. Some people got personal responses back from me that said, sent from my BlackBerry. And he clearly was getting and paying attention to it. Also, chiefs of staff, if you can deliver something, not to the legislative correspondent or something, but someone who's unused to it, especially for really high power things. Not high power, high profile things. The fact that you're delivering it to someone who is actually thinking about the implications, they see that, on their BlackBerry, not that you're sending necessarily each individual to them, but sending them a letter saying hey, we have this. We have 5,000 signatures of your constituents who think about that. That type of stuff can have an impact. Okay, so I'll stop there because I know I'm kind of running long. But I hope that gave you some different ideas about how you could use online petitions effectively.
Hey folks, I'm Micheal Whitney, and I'm going to talk in the same vein as Matt, but with funnier pictures.
And profanity.
And profanity, that's right. That's how I work. Plus a million to everything Matt said, especially about target selection and scaring the shit out of people who aren't expecting it. It's really, really important. So I'm a campaign director at change.org, which is the world's fastest growing social platform. And my specific job is kind of along the lines of what Matt does. I just write emails all day and urge people to take action on different campaigns. But the trick to doing that is, well, here's just a funny picture. But seriously, what is really critical to being effective online is Tyler's presentation. You want to be awesome. You want to make sure that whatever your supporters are getting, it's going to be the best goddamn thing they're going to get in their inbox all day, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a good campaign, what makes it awesome, and then kind of how to hook on to what's happening in the real world. So you want to really make sure that no matter what happens with what you're doing, you don't want somebody to hear what you're doing and be like, oh, well, yeah, MoveOn is complaining about this thing, right? Or this labor organization is not happy with this National Labor Relations Board decision, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're taking on, people will think twice and say, wait, really, is this what I'm saying? Is this really what's going to be in front of me? And you want to be able to, I think the challenge that a lot of people get into when they're organizing is a lot of us exist in our own little world of policy, or you get wrapped up into this one specific issue, and you take for granted that everyone around you who you're communicating with is not even close to the level of detail and immersion in something that you're actually working with. And so what's really important is try to figure out where people are. And you want to go to where your supporters are, or to where potential supporters already exist, and then bring them into you. But in order to do that, you need to step out to them first. And like I said, you want to be surprising too, right? You don't want to be able to you don't want to do something that people will be like, oh yeah, obviously, this group is doing this campaign and it's totally expected and I'm going to ignore it. And really, you want to be so awesome that someone gets an email from their grandma and from you, and they're like, sorry, grandma, like, this petition is so much more important. Right? You want to get to a point where over time, people know that they can just expect something great. You want to be a person, you want to be an organizer, you want to be a group that is able to talk to your supporters in a way that they know that what you're saying to them is super important, it's super timely, and that they can make a difference, right? And this is, I think with a lot of organizations in the nonprofit industrial complex, like you get this isolated nature, right? And you need to figure out how to break through and really matter in someone's actual life. This is not my grandpa. So the phrase that really cuts through, which is not my phrase, is actually first Homer Simpson said it, and then Ben Branzel, who is at the DNC and is doing like online organizer worldwide extraordinaire, applied this, and it's crisis-opportunity. You have a crisis and you have an opportunity, right? You need to go and highlight something that's happening to people, and you say, wow, this building is burning down right now. Not this one, I hate building. But we have a fire hydrant and a hose, right? And if we point this in the right direction, we can put out this fire. Example of that is 49 exotic animals were killed in Ohio when their owner set them free. And it only happened because Ohio has the most lax standards in the country when it comes to exotic animal ownership, right? That's a crisis. But the opportunity is that, everybody's talking about this story. Everybody's talking about these animals. And Governor Kasich in Ohio, this is the perfect opportunity to go to him and say, like, dude, your exotic animal laws are allow some dude to own 15 tigers or whatever it is. Right? And you just can't do that. If there's any moment in time to try to get an exotic animal ban, it's after 49 of them escape. Right? So, and not everything is going to be as crystal clear or like national prominence as this, but that's the kind of thing you need to think about, right? How can you identify something that's happening in the world, and then look for a moment where your supporters can say, wow, yeah, I can be a part of this, and I can fix something that's messed up. And with that, Matt went into theory change a little bit, but after you have a crisis and an opportunity is kind of the setup to what needs to be changed, right? So, a theory change is a cause and effect. What can somebody do right now to fix this problem? And how will taking that action actually fix it, right? So often, and Matt went into a couple of bad theories change, like the Norm Coleman Democratic Senatorial Committee is awful, and it spawned the progressive, the PCCC, Jason back there is part of it. So often though in my inbox, I got one the other day that was, President Obama needs to end the war on medical marijuana. How is signing this petition going to do that, right? What is going to happen? So you need to identify a place where once you set up the crisis and the opportunity, what is someone going to be able to do to actually make it? And you know what? It needs to be totally believable. It needs to be real, and it just cannot be, if you sign this, if you build it, they will come. Is online organizing like default, and it's just not, it doesn't work. I asked this one the other day, actually, also. Congress won't extend unemployment benefits. Sign our petition to Congress to send Congress a lump of coal, right? It does. How is a lump of coal going to tell Congress they need to extend unemployment benefits, right? What leverage do you have? What leverage do you have to get Congress to extend unemployment benefits? What members of Congress are going to be looking at? Who actually cares about getting a lump of coal when you're a member of Congress? Right? You need to expand this and figure out what is it that your action is going to have. We'll do another really awful one. This one I got from some folks at the DNC. No, but I'm sorry, this is not an actual DNC thing. This is, the folks at DNC found this in another presentation, and it's really good, right? This is totally clear. DNC is awesome. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker is pursuing a radical agenda. Call his office and tell him to stop. Right? Oh, if only Scott Walker got a phone call. Right? If only somebody had said, Scott, oh, buddy. So, and here are some good things to change from the folks at the DNC who did this initial presentation, Ben Simon and Matt Compton. Majority Americans want to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but right-wing voices drowning them out with a flood of calls will raise pressure until they push this bill over the finish line, right? You have this setup where you have Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and right now there's a lot of pressure from the other side to get this, to not pass it. But, you know, if you do this, it will raise pressure until they can push it over the finish line, right? It's not entirely plausible, but it has a cause and effect sequence, right? Here's another good one. China's Burma's only real ally, and if China pressures the junta, Burma will have to back down. We'll launch a petition today and publishing your signatures in the Financial Times with huge circulation among the power brokers in Beijing. This is a bank shot, but it shows real-world impact of, like, if you sign this petition, your signature is going to be in the Financial Times, and it's going to have a real impact in what people see. All right, so like when you're rolling out the theory of change, you need to assume that people know nothing, right? Like I was saying, people get caught up in their own worlds, right? You need to spell it out so simply that here's this problem. If we take this action, it will have this impact on this decision maker, which will force them to do this, right? So often we say like, oh, if you sign this, this will happen. No, like, how is taking this action gonna? What's the chain of events that will come from the signature to making something actually real? And when you do that, you know, it's basically like laying out a direct, you know, arrow to arrow to arrow. How's that going to do it? And then don't bullshit, because people can spell bullshit just wherever it is, right? It's so easy to do like, oh, if we sign this, it's going to happen. No, right? Be real. So here are some things to do and not to do. I hate facts. Facts get in the way of a good campaign often because it's like, hey, there have been, you know, $500 million donated to this person, and there's like X percent of greenhouse gases are causing this problem, and it's boring. Nobody cares about numbers. You glaze over when you get numbers in some sort of a pitch. And also, it's like there's something about a plea to reason, like, oh, if like-minded people get together, right, we'll show that our side is right. And it's like, okay, while that logically may be sound, it doesn't actually work because that's not how the world works, right? There are pressure points, and you need to figure out where that is. Facts and logic for me, I think, are, this is bad, but facts and logic really are just not as powerful as pulling on emotion and telling real people's stories, right? If you have somebody who's affected by an issue, let them speak, right? Let them show how they're affected by high gas prices, right? Let them show how they're affected by an insane deportation policy, right? Their family's going to be broken up. You can do a petition, you can do a campaign that's like, we need ICE to stop deporting 1 million people a year. That's a real number. But that's not as compelling as like, this person is being deported tomorrow, right? Their family's about to be broken up and they're going to be in 3 different countries. And that's basically my way of saying, like, a lot of organizations will have like researchers about facts, and that's cool for lobbying, but like, you need to tell people stories. Opportunities to be awesome in a campaign. Matt went into a lot of this, but just a couple things, like, look what's happening in the news, right? What are people talking about? How are people actually, you know, what are they consuming? What are they doing? Go to them. Look at advertising, right? People who are running ads, like, you guys heard about this, this small group in Florida got Lowe's to pull its advertising from the TLC show All American Muslim, right? it was great work by that organization. Like, they're totally wrong and evil, but like, they identified an issue that they thought needed to be fixed, and they were able to correctly target an advertiser and get them to pull ads. On the other side, like what color change is done around Glenn Beck and everything, you can't target Glenn Beck and say, Glenn Beck, stop being an asshole, right? But you can pull his money away. And then deadlines, real or imagined, real is better, but like, you know, there's an FEC fundraising deadline, which happens like every 30 days now. But you know, look at what's happening and make people feel like they have to take action in a really short amount of time. And then the final question you ask yourself is, when I show this on Facebook and somebody else showed it to me, right? Just like, it's a gut check, like, do I care? You know, don't do something just to do it because you think that you need to really target Scott Walker and stop him from doing it. Like, think about, you know, do people care? One example of how to seize this is, have you all heard of the Employee Free Choice Act? It was a bill in Congress that would make it easier for workers to join together for workplace fairness. Nobody cared about it, right? Because it's got a boring name, it's an internal labor thing, it's so super tough. Employee Free Choice Act was just a tough campaign. And I was working on it while I was at SCIU. And so we had to figure out, like, all right, how do we make people care about it? And so what we did was, back in spring of '09, there was a lot of talk about pirates in Somalia, right? There were pirates were hijacking ships left and right, and it was a big news story. And one of those ships, the Merritt's Alabama, one of their crewmates did an interview on the Today Show and said, you know, we were able to fight these pirates off our ship because we were union members and we stand together. And I saw that and I was like, fuck yeah. Right? And so I cut the video together, we did an email, we did a share page, and it was like, check this out. This is why unions are awesome. Not everybody has to fight off pirates at work. But it promotes solidarity, you come together, you protect yourselves against threats. And you know, it didn't pass the Employee Free Choice Act. However, it gave our members an opportunity to really, we went to where people were, right? People are talking about pirates on the news all the time back then. And it was an opportunity to say, like, this is why this bill is relevant. This is a union member who loves his union. And finally, know what you can control, in that try to, like, this is basically what Matt was talking about. Like, don't go for President Obama because President Obama can control everything. Like, look for the bureaucrat in the EPA who's in charge of this decision and just scare the shit out of them. Don't tell your members that something can happen when you know it can't. So just be realistic. Message success, because the last thing you want to do is write another thing of, we lost what we wrote, but it was a very hard fight, and we'll get them next time. You want to do that when you fail, but you need to give people the opportunity to also, like, celebrate success. Look at small victories and say, like, this is what we're doing together. It's just really important to reinforce that. And again, like, when you do mess up, tell them, right? Don't just hide it under the rug. People want report backs. People want to know what happens. That's how to be fucking awesome. So.
Late today anyway, I figured folks would be okay. Oh, yes. We need 5 minutes and then we'll do questions. Sorry. Maybe we'll do questions for everybody in.
Okay, great.
Okay. Read discussions just a little bit, because everything's been late anyway, and no one can so. Do folks have any questions they want to direct to the panel? I'm going to just take a quick stash and then that'll be okay. Two. Thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say briefly on asks.
Speak up louder.
Oh, sorry, on asks. Have you tried funny asks? Like, I saw a really successful ask, like, to declare Congress a vegetable, and it just went wild. And I saw one of the most popular Facebook pages is Scott Walker's a douchebag. It's like 65,000 people like it. So the ask is only
Yeah, and we definitely have done funny asks. I think this is part of the kind of sometimes your emotional thing, or people are engaging in other ways. One of the first ones I did was containers full of crap, and I did it with crowd like go to the back of the room. We're signing a petition, and for every person who signs it, we'll donate some money to get manure for farmers in the developing world through Oxfam.
Can you speak in this direction?
What?
Speak in this
For
direction
each
so
person
we can
who-
hear you.
So, sorry, for each person who signed the petition, we would donate money so farmers in the developing world can get manure. It's something that Oxfam does, and so people thought it was funny to sign the Dick Cheney's full of crap petition.
Funny about
Can
that.
I ask one more?
There's also a panel later today about using comedy in your campaigns.
With John, the guy
Hey,
who
with us.
My new best friend back there.
When I think of organizing, I think of it as being kind of hierarchical, like, here you are, and you're in Oakland, and you send this out, and there's all these people, and they give you their information, but you don't connect them in a non-hierarchical landscape. Versus, a lot of what's happened in Wisconsin is just really pell-mell, and because it's so pell-mell, then we do have like all these interesting strata. There's no hierarchy with those stuff. And like I went to Speak Out, and we talked about taking those stories, and they're really powerful. And I think that's good. Like when you had a public Speak Out, we were in the rotunda, and we had, illegally brought in, it was awesome. This woman comes up, she's from lacrosse, and therefore I was able to connect with her. So I have the connection, and I can kind of create that new loop.
But I think that's,
So are you able to do that?
yeah, I mean, that's actually what good organizing is not this top, good organizing is actually connecting to people networks with one another and plugging networks together. And that's actually what helps kind of flatten some of those hierarchies. And I don't like to just think about everything going this way. It's more kind of 3D where stories travel through networks, and you have networks big and small. And whenever you're connecting with people, that's the thing that you actually have to keep in mind. I'm not just connecting with a community member, I'm connecting with a community member and her network. And how do I activate that?
The internet organizing doesn't solve all organizing challenges. So some of what you're talking about is just like organizing, and to some degree you can use these tools for that purpose, but it doesn't replace certain things that need to be done in person.
So we're going to resume the stack in a minute, but we'll just do this beforehand. Thank you so much.
Hi guys, my name is Chaz Maston, and I am the CTO of 5 Points, and I am not a political activist. You guys are the guys who change the world, and I am a guy who writes code, and I'm a video game designer. And about a year ago, I was approached by some guys who said, hey, let's look at the political space and see if we can figure something out to do that's interesting. And so we looked at it, we looked at what people did for a variety of things online. We realized that there's not a lot of need online for another way to aggregate Twitter feeds and to shoot them out to people. But we said, what isn't being done online, and what is done only for the top campaigns? And could we build something that every single campaign in the country could use? Oops, sorry. And so we came up with this idea of 5 Points. And 5 Points is a mobile, get out the vote, gamified political tool. And it's available for any campaign. And the idea is that you go in, you create a campaign, and you immediately have a mobile app, and it works on all platforms. And we're also going to be wrapping it, so it's going to be available through the App Store. But what we have here is a sample campaign, Tony for Senate. And you can go check this out right now at 5points.com. It's with a number 5, IVE. And we, by the way, have a booth outside, or not a booth, but a table. So you create your campaign, and then you've got areas for events and a gallery and all these kind of things that you would think you would have on a normal website. But we said, all right, well, that's cool, but now what can we do? And so we created missions-based campaigning. So you've got this to your supporters, right? And then they're going to be able to do things like do social missions, where they're posting on their Facebook, they're posting Twitter. They can check in. So it's sort of like Foursquare for politics, but they can check in at events. But where it gets really interesting is when they can add a voter. So this is me, and I'm going to check against the voter rolls, and we're instantly querying 170 million voter records, and we're finding that there's actually a couple of Charles Mastons in this area, and that's me. And once I talked to me, I would go through the talking points of whatever the particular campaign is, and then it's very simple. You just rate how likely a person is to support a campaign. Now what this dial is it's our most likely voter algorithm. So it looks at you, your voting record, your demographic information, where you live, and finds out how likely you are to support a particular campaign. Now why is that important? Because a campaign needs to focus on people that actually matter and are going to get to the polls. If you waste time talking to people that aren't going to support your campaign, you waste your time and your money. So that's just, on one level, you can just do a mission where you just check in voters. What we can also do is we can geolocate you and pull all the voters around you. So we geo-indexed all the voter rolls. And by the way, once again, this is available to everybody with our application. It used to be only available to the top of the top for millions of dollars. We're going to make it available to everybody for very little. Thank you. So here we can look that obviously we're in Manhattan, so there's going to be a lot of Democrats. This is a sample Democratic campaign. We can see these people, we can go up, we can knock on their doors, and once again we can instantly identify how likely they are to support the campaign. And then later on in the campaign cycle, there's other missions that are going to be contacting these people. One of the things we're doing is we're refining our algorithm, so we're going to be able to instantly change how likely a person is to support your campaign over the course of the campaign. In other words, you start talking to Hispanics and find out that they are actually more likely to support your candidate, we're going to increase the likelihood of them to be returned as the most likely voter. So another cool thing is everybody knows phone lists, right? The idea of like getting people together in one spot to call at one time is over. It's a waste of time and resources because everybody's got unlimited minutes on their smartphone. So what we do is we create phone lists on the fly. First off, these people you're looking at right here are actually my Facebook friends. So we pull in your Facebook friends, index them against the phone records, and immediately make them available for you to call. Because affinity campaigning is the way you get people to the polls. The reason we did all this, by the way, is because broadcast is becoming less and less effective. Right? It used to be it cost $30 a voter to get them to vote. Now it costs over $70. But narrowcast works. You can go out and talk to your friends and you say you really need to support this person, and they'll actually go to the polls. So we're really hoping to sort of disintermediate the traditional campaign broadcast networks too. So once again, if these weren't my Facebook people, we would just return people more likely to support your campaign. So find yourself in your roles, knocking on it, letters to the editor, all this stuff now, you can send out a new mission to all your people instantly, like shooting a letter to the editor or something that you want to incentivize your people to do, and they've got it on their phone, they're ready to do it right there with two or three clicks. All this also ties into SMS and email, which is obviously crucial on the back end. And there's a bunch of other stuff in terms of reporting and analytics. There's Daniel, our director of analytics, is right there, so you can talk to me or him afterwards. I don't want to take up too much of your time because it's really a product pitch, but if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, and I'm sure we can find it.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I knew we had stack, and I lost track of where it was, and I apologize, but I believe we were making this way that way and then you, right? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, and I was kind of picking up on the thread of what Deanna and Matt were saying in answer to her question, but a lot of what Matt and Michael talked about was how to activate people on lists that you already have. And I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about, especially from your organizations, ways of building up your list and ways of attracting new people. I think there's a lot of overlap with what you said, but I think it's a somewhat different approach.
It's kind of, it's a longer conversation, and I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards about it. I mean, but I think that do petition, I mean, it does help. Be awesome, have the theory of change, be timely, and talk about things that matter to people.
Yeah, it's slow going. Not everybody, there's very few ways to jumpstart a list. But what's key, I found, for kind of breakout campaigns is not to jump on what everybody else is already doing. Like, everybody's going to be doing an action around Obama's Plan B decision, right? But think about an issue that is like a unique angle that then you can, it's basically how is it unique to jump on a share factor, right? Like, what can get people sharing and then passing it along.